Good afternoon. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Don't Call This a Podcast, our Election 2020 miniseries. I am your host, Ryan McLaughlin. With me, as usual, the usual suspects. Courtney is in the building today.
Sorry. I was
I have
doing
my
something
child
else.
here. I was like, all right, whatever.
See, I did it. All right.
You did it. You fixed it. I appreciate you. Courtney's in the building today. Courtney, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm here showing off my newest child right here.
The gigantic baby in the background.
It's going to get more obnoxious as time goes on.
All right. I respect it. I do appreciate it. Also joining us, Ronnie. Ronnie's back in the building.
How's it going?
And then Brandon is not able to join us right now. He's a little bit busy with his move to the Mountain Time Zone. You know, he's just kind of a little bit behind as far as we're concerned. So we're probably going to start moving this to a little bit later so that he can join us and be live with us instead of having to come halfway through. If you haven't tuned in already, if you haven't subscribed to us, make sure you subscribe to thekidswearcrowns.com. Follow us on Twitter at the KWC blog. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, The Kids Wear Crowns, and YouTube. Channel search for the KWC blog. You'll be able to find it that way. A lot has happened this week, a whole bunch. And before we dive into things, I just want to ask y'all how y'all are doing before we get a little bit angry and upset this afternoon. Courtney, what's going on?
I'm just so exhausted by the news. I'm not even drinking alcohol. It's just caffeine. We can't all three of us be reckless. So I was like, let me just get rid of this overwhelming headache from everything I was reading. So,
Ron, how about you? What's going on?
So, once again, without telling the people what I do exactly, I always tell people we never know we're living in historic times. Like they may seem ordinary. But the times may become significant later. Obviously, that's a lie because everything that's happened this past week has just it's coming in so fast I can hardly have enough time to process it. So right now I'm just like my mind is just flooded with everything that's happening right now. And much of that we'll get into.
All right. Well, again, before we dive into things, I do want to say make sure you tune in tomorrow. We're going to have a special edition of the show where I will be able to sit down with a one-on-one interview with Sam Park, who's the deputy whip for the Democrats in the Georgia General Assembly. And so I'm very excited about that. He was just featured at the Democratic National Convention. And we've got a couple other big ones coming up soon, very, very soon. So be sure to tune in. Be sure to keep up with us and subscribe as we asked you before. All right. Let's get into the news. There's been a lot that's happened this week. Most notably, we're going to go ahead and try and laugh first before we get into the anger portions. Most notably, President Trump on Tuesday was involved in a town hall hosted by ABC, moderated by George Stephanopoulos. I hope I say that right. I feel like I always stumble on that. It was a disaster to say the least. Trump stumbled through a lot of the questions that he was given, including some absolute layups. He talked talked over a question that a black woman presented, who quickly asked him to let her finish, which is we'll get into that. And then he also told a black male voter that he doesn't think racism is a problem. That, among other things, most notably, my possible favorite was blaming Joe Biden for a lack of a national mask mandate. Ron, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was this?
Typically his team doesn't allow him to do things like this unless they're in a controlled environment. So I'm very shocked that this happened in the first place. And no level of preparation could have made him ready for this moment, mostly because everything he stands for, just like he sits on the throne of lies anyway. So nothing would have prepared him from this moment. And that was on display. And I think when you saw a lot of the reactions for people in the crowd, think about this. Would most people address a president like that? And I just mean a president, not the president. I mean any president ever. And I think that's an important moment because it's starting to show that we, the people, well, most of us at least, really don't respect this guy as a president. I think we're starting to like say, okay, nah, we got to hold you accountable on this because everything you're saying is a lie right now. And we'll get into him cutting off the lady trying to ask her question, but yeah, I'm very glad she did that because yeah, like this guy works for you, like not the other way around. So I'm very glad that he was basically put on a Summer Jam screen like this.
And Courtney, I kind of want to ask you along those lines because, yeah, that question was an utter disaster. But then he also got into things where he talked about herd immunity for the coronavirus, which he called herd mentality. We're already at 200,000 people dead and 6.6 million cases. I think I did the math when writing up the notes. In order to reach herd immunity for something that people can become immune to, you need about 60% of the population. Which is somewhere in the realm of 216 million cases, which is 32 times the amount that we have now. So please, let's talk a little bit about this, Courtney. What are your thoughts on Trump's strategy to just kind of ride this thing on out?
People are dying. That's my overarching thoughts at the very surface level. And, it was exposed that, that was his goal, was just to downplay it as much as possible, even though they knew that was going to kill lots of people. If anything, everything he does shows that he does not care about people, period, ever. People are dying. And here's another thing that people are seeming to forget. One, there are many strains of this thing. You can have had one and then get another one. And in your immunity does not last. I don't have the exact numbers on this, but they're theorizing that it's no more than like 1 to 2 months. So you can catch it. They're not 100% sure if it's just like it doesn't go away, but people test positive multiple times, even though it's been months. So there's no proof that there's true herd immunity here. So that's a whole other issue. But the fact that he continues to push this, and we're continuing to be so far behind everyone else. And another thing is that we got one stimulus check. They cut people's unemployment once again. But he's doing all this. And then there was also a headline where it was like, oh, yeah, Trump says that the Democrats are they don't care about the people because they didn't approve this stimulus check or this new bill. And I'm just like, can you just shut the... I'm not going to cuss anymore.
I'm in agreement there in terms of like we've talked a lot about the Senate's failed attempts to help, which implies that they actually want to help. And that's kind of been an issue throughout this whole thing, right? Like we knew this whole time, and a lot of us have advocated and hoped that Democrats would not cave in terms of just approving anything, right? And they tried to give some. They wanted a $3 trillion bill, and the Senate said no. We want $500 billion. So they came back and said, okay, well, meet us halfway. Let's do 1.5. And they said no. So it's not a thing where they're not trying. But back to this town hall in the sense that it just kind of further shows how disconnected he is, because one of the comments that he made, he kind of assumed that everybody had stocks, right? He assumed that everybody had connection to these things that they just don't. And it just really shows how not only him, but the Republican Party is so out of touch with most Americans, and that they've really just been kind of pounding and banging the drum of racism for the last 50, 60 years, that they can kind of pull the wool over the eyes, right? And it's not to say that anybody who like I come short of the line of saying anybody who votes Republican is racist, mainly because I think a lot of them just don't know, right? You are fed propaganda, you're fed information. And if you've grown up in this little echo chamber of a small suburban town or of, little country rural environment, you don't know anything different. And the lies that you've been told about why you vote Republican are the lies that you stick with and that you apply to. But this, of all things, if this wasn't a cult, it would be easy to see just how out of touch he is, right? Like, this is a man who thought everybody has stocks. This is a man who just thinks that everybody can just kind of up and financially deal with the situation. It kind of shows in the ways that they don't want to provide relief, right? Because they think that people are just mooching off of it. They don't understand that, no, there's people with $0 in their bank account right now. There's people in the red right now. And I go back to what Ron said. how in the world did his handlers and his team let him do this? Because there was no way in an environment where he can be immediately fact checked. And I want to give Stephanopoulos the credit for immediately fact checking him, right? Like he wasn't vicious. He wasn't horrible. He wasn't attacking him. He fact checked him. And of course, Laura Ingraham and Fox News covered this as an ambush of Trump, but they fact checked him and made him look bad. And these are the things that you have to do, which is why the debates coming up are really going to interest me, because it'll be somebody who, and we can get into this a little bit later, but he's going to go up against somebody who, say what you want about Joe Biden, is going to be prepared for the attacks that he's going to have. He's no longer the outsider candidate where we don't know what he's going to throw at us. We've had 4 years to see this. And so that's what's really going to interest me, because I feel like this town hall was a precursor to what we're going to see at the end of the month.
Agreed.
Agree. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, what was their strategy with having him do this? Because it's not like they wouldn't know. There's no way they wouldn't know.
But unless you're just so arrogant, right? Unless you just are so sure that the American people are going to be on your side, that they're going to trust you no matter what, and understand everything that you're saying, that they're not worn out of everything that you do, right? I mean, the thing about this election is that the less Trump there is, the better chance he has. But Trump is incapable of allowing there to be less Trump. So he's got to, at every single turn, he's got to be in front of the camera. He's got to be saying something. And that, to me, is what is eventually going to do him in. Hopefully. But it's outstanding to me, because he could have gotten away with so much in terms of the obstruction and everything like that if he would just shut up. Like if he just would not talk. But he has to telegraph everything. Therefore, people know, and therefore the resistance is much larger. Ron, you wanted to talk about the black woman telling him not to interrupt. I know you had something for that, so I'll let you get that in.
Oh, it just goes back to my point. So if I'm in the town hall with let's say President George Bush, as if I were of age at the time, and he interrupted me, like I said, my reaction wouldn't have been like that. But then again, you don't expect a president to cut you off in that manner anyway. Like, even if you disagree with this president, even if there's like differences between ideologies, but it just goes to show you that Trump is like, he has to win the argument, and that's not the person you want as a leader. So like I said, I'm glad to see a citizen say, nah, you're going to listen to me on this. Like, that was a very important moment. And I already know she's going to catch flack for it, but she's a hero. Yeah, exactly. But no, that was a very important moment. And like I said, there are just certain things you don't expect from a president. And one of them is like cutting off like one of their citizens trying to give a concern. So yeah, like, and that's why I think the flack is unwarranted, because basically she had every right to respond in the manner in which she did. So I'm glad that happened. Like, I am on record I'm glad that I saw that moment. So yeah.
I will add one little bit too, just also in today's climate and day and age, as a woman, especially as a Black woman, who is so, I'm sure even because they're even more interrupted. It goes back to like the Lovecraft Country quote. Like, you get so tired of being interrupted, and also it's that, and also a president that disrespects you so much. I could just tell you were just fed up, because I probably would have said the same thing. Because it's just a culmination of like, you not only do you not respect the president, but like everything he embodies is associated with you, with the culture that interrupts you all the time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a salient point to make, especially when you just kind of consider that this is, I just, again, you are doing a town hall unfiltered where people can really challenge you, and think about how much worse this would have been if there were more people in there, right? Like, they only allowed a certain amount of people in there because of COVID and because of the restrictions. This is somebody that feeds off of an audience. And I think that's another reason why the debates are going to go disastrous for him, is that he won't have those kind of hooting and hollering just sort of instigators in the background that he had in 2016. And so I think it's going to be it's interesting to me see in real time, right? I think he's hit his floor, right? He's hit his floor in terms of support. It's not going to get any worse, right? We're at the point where 200,000 people have died. He has failed to take action. He's on tape. We're going to talk about this in a little bit because we talked about Woodward last week, but he's on tape about downplaying the virus. He is on tape about disregarding systemic racism. He has, new stuff came out about how he wanted to commit even more war crimes against protesters in DC, just to go get a photo op at a church. So, I mean, it's just, he has hit his floor. So what we're doing at this point is if you're Trump, you are trying not to stay at that floor, right? You're trying to pull as many independents back to you as you can, because he could win the Electoral College with 35% support, right? As long as it's in the right places. But he went to a swing state, one that is probably going to decide the election. If Pennsylvania goes Biden and Arizona looks like it's going to go Biden, that's it. It's over. There's nothing else going on. So he goes to a swing state and he just poops the bed, for lack of a better term. So I guess let's continue with this and let's kind of transition. Let's talk about another part of that town hall that was a disaster. Stephanopoulos asked him about his COVID response and gave him the open-ended question of this is what I'm talking about with a lob. What more could you have done to stop this? This is not a dunk. This is not you were terrible, you didn't do XYZ. This is open-ended question. Tell me, Courtney, you're the president of the United States in this situation. What more could you have done to stop this? What is your response as a competent human being?
Here's something that's hard is that Trump has done like everything so horribly. So I don't even know what I could say if I had fumbled it so poorly. But at least he could have played up. I mean, it has been so distant since the help bill and they just ended that. So I don't even know if that was a good idea. He's backed himself into a corner so poorly, but as poorly as I would have answered it because it was handled so poorly, he went worse. But it's all tied to ego. That's the thing. It's his own ego. It gets in his way so much.
I will say, let me add these quotes before you kind of finish your statement and we flip on here. He said, I didn't downplay it. In many ways, I actually upplayed it in terms of action. My action was very strong. He continued, it is going to disappear. It's going to disappear. I still say it. We're not going to have studios like this where you have all this empty space in between. I want to see people and you want to see people. I want to see football games. I'm pushing very hard for Big Ten. I want to see Big Ten open, let the football games, let them play sports. So he also gave a bunch of incomplete sentences, but I'm speechless. I don't know what else you need to see, right? If you're an independent at this point, what else do you need?
What are you doing? What do you need? What are you looking for?
Go
ahead.
No, you go ahead. I've been talking.
Even that verbiage, it's like what he's directly telling the American people is that we're done with the protections. We're done with helping people. We're gonna act like everything is fine, and people are gonna. That's what that says, honestly. And and we just need comparisons to other countries that have done way better. Mm-hmm. and have started to, there's still minor outbreaks, but a lot of places are growing more and more towards normalcy. Then he's like, he's like, not only did I not downplay it, which in that news had just come out, and there's so much proof that he did because there's proof they knew in January about how bad this was. He didn't even try to divert.
No. Honestly,
if I were in his shoes and I was as terrible as he was, at least maybe divert. Because he's done that. I think you mute him. Yeah.
So,
Ron.
and like you said, this is such a lob. So even when he has the opportunity to come off as even somewhat presidential, he gets hung on the rim. This was a lob. All you had to say was, this is a novel coronavirus. There was a lot of varying opinions. We did what we thought was best at the time. We've since realized that was wrong. I didn't want the American people to panic until I knew what we were dealing with. He could have said something along those lines. It would have been
He would
BS.
never admit he was wrong, Ron.
Yeah, but but that's what I'm saying. That's the thing.
Mhm.
Because I was going to like circle back around to this point. No. You set that up perfectly. So thank you. But no, he is so full of himself that he can never admit fault. So and although that is a lob, Stephanopoulos kind of framed the question in the right way. He was like, what more could you have done? Implying that you didn't do enough. So that kind of pulled that reaction out of him as well. And yeah, like he can't admit fault. That isn't presidential as well. And his answers were just like he is still convinced, at least we think so, that this thing is just going to go away, and it's not. It is not going away. I am a Manchester United fan, and even in England, with Boris Johnson, they're going to have like stadium capacities between 50 and 75%, like in October, and here we are. Well, I mean, America is too, but for the wrong reasons. But that's what I'm saying. Like so many other countries, developed countries around the world, have this thing under control. And obviously it's something with America why we haven't gotten this thing under control yet, and it starts at the top.
I don't really have a lot of words left to say, and I keep stammering around. I'm trying to put things into like intellectual or sentences that make sense, right? There are so many times throughout the last 4 years where he was given lobs and the opportunity to make himself look presidential, to make himself look like he was competent enough to get this thing done, which is the one thing that a lot of these independents, a lot of these kind of soft Republicans, it's the one thing that they wanted out of him, right? He would be cruising to re-election if in March he did what was needed to be done to protect the country. He would have been easily ahead. He would have had those independent votes. He would have had those soft Republican votes. Not to say he would have been deserving of it, because he still has committed a ton of crimes in his presidency, but it would have happened, right? We know this country, we know how it functions and operates, but he can't do that. And if you can't see that him being incapable of even having an ounce of empathy, which we're going to talk about a little bit here in a second, if you can't see that him being incapable of having an ounce of empathy is not a greater or a microcosm of him as a person and as a president, I don't know what else to tell you. Nothing else will change your mind.
You were going to vote for him anyway.
Pretty much. And that's what the RNC was, right? It was creating a permission structure for people to feel like he's not racist, he's not a complete buffoon, and to give them the permission to come back to him. And he's kind of blown that up here. And we'll talk about polls towards the end of the show, but he's kind of blown that up here in the last 2 weeks. So,
and can I say something?
Absolutely.
It's kind of hard to imagine what the world would be like right now without the pandemic, because everything has changed forever. I don't know if I see any chance of him even losing the re-election if there wasn't a pandemic, honestly, because nothing exposed how just ill-equipped he is than this. Because a lot of things you can hide, a lot of things you can act like it doesn't exist, and he can try with this pandemic, but it's growing and it's just so in people's faces. You can't. I think this is the one thing you just can't. And it's dominated the news continually. You can't hope that the news cycle gets over it. This is because it keeps going.
I completely agree. Let's move on to something a little bit more ridiculous. And Ron, you said you wanted to take first crack at this.
Oh yeah,
I will let you talk about it. But yesterday, during a press conference, President Trump uttered something completely ridiculous when asked about being America approaching 200,000 deaths from COVID-19, and his claim was if the coronavirus numbers would basically not be as strong or as bad if you took the blue states out of it. I'll refrain. Ron, I will let you have the window here, and then I will let Courtney have it before I give my little rant. So, Ron, go ahead.
Okay, we are all millennials here, and sometimes if you watch this show in the past, you see like just high energy, like strong reactions, like emotion, basically. Because I mean, we are mad right now. We
Mhm.
have a lot to say, but sometimes we got to bring it back around to the science. So when I read that claim, I instantly crunched some numbers, and the numbers were so ridiculous that I actually had to go find sources to back my numbers. I was like, am I? Do I know how to do algebra anymore? Like, is this? But no, I found a New York Times article that corroborated everything that I found when I crunched the numbers. First, and by the way, this is going to take a minute, so bear with me. I'm going to give you the 10 most populous states in the United States of America. First, no surprise here, California. Second, Texas. Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, and Michigan at 10. Okay. Now I'm going to give you, like, keep those in the back of your head. Now I'm going to give you the states that have the most COVID cases. Number one, California, once again, the most populous state. So no surprise there. Texas, second most populous state. No surprise there. Florida, New York. Here's where it gets interesting, though. After New York, we have Georgia, we have Illinois, we have Arizona, we have New Jersey, we have North Carolina, and we have Tennessee. Three of those states don't appear in the most populous states list. Okay. Now, even more interesting, we're going to do a little bit by per capita. So if you take the state's population and you slice it by 100,000, this is how many cases you would find. Basically, this is the most cases per 100,000. The number one, Louisiana. Two, Florida. Three, Mississippi. Four, Arizona. Five, Alabama. Six, Georgia. Seven, South Carolina. Eight, Tennessee. Nine, Texas. 10, Iowa.
Hey,
Now,
Ron, real quick, what do all of those states have in common?
now, what do all those states have in common?
Hmm.
What
Who are all their governors?
with the exception of John Bell Edwards, the governor of Louisiana, what do these states have in common? And I mind you, I highlighted these to point these out. Louisiana, Mississippi, Arizona, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Iowa do not appear in the list of most populous states or the list for most COVID cases, which means if you take population into account and the number of cases that correlates with the population, they have a higher rate of COVID there. I wonder why. So, in every way possible, Trump's claim is wrong. Michigan, because I saw Michigan's number. Michigan, as of today, it has 125,000 COVID cases. California, in comparison, once again, the most populous state, has over 700,000. They're leaning towards 800,000. Just gonna throw that out there. So once again, that claim, I don't even know how he made that. And he lies all the time, true enough, but he made that statement as if it was backed by some sort of science. And his press secretary said we have different numbers. We go by different numbers. Obviously, they do, because here you go.
We'll go by made up numbers. But go ahead, Courtney.
So here's something to go off of that. This is also I'm sure he himself and his base don't know what per capita means. And they think that land can vote. I personally am convinced that they don't grasp the concept that there's a whole part of the United States that people just don't live. I think that people, especially ones that don't really leave town much, think that it's just town. Every part of the United States is occupied, is what I'm convinced. That's what I think. And they're like, well, and I just don't think they make the connection that, well, obviously these states have more people, because here's the thing, we've seen them doing it with Chicago. Yes, Chicago does have a problem with crime, but here's another thing. When you compare it per capita, they act like it's the only place that has a problem. When you compare it to other places per capita, it's not that dramatic. It is because the city is much larger. It's a very large city, and everyone's tightly compact. So it's the same kind of concept. They can't grasp population like that. They just can't. And a lot of them, they don't go to cities like that. They just don't. They don't grasp that, and that's where I think a lot of that comes from. But I'm sure he just came up with it because he gets most of his information from Fox News. We have to remember that. It's almost fact, like proven, because if you just look at his tweets, the timing of his tweets with Fox News stories, it's always around the same exact time. You can tell when he's watching Fox News, but he gets his information from there, and that's just the way they project it to be. It's like they only mention New York, they only mention California, but they don't mention any of the other states. And I think the most important thing is the per capita. Like, they have a higher infection rate. Like, yes, California has more, but if you look at how Georgia and Alabama are doing, that it's like more people in comparison to their population are getting it. But I think I would have lost a Trump supporter's attention by that point. And I think that's what it comes to. We need people that are capable and we need people that are science literate in positions of power so that they can utilize that information and they don't just get it by watching the news. We need people that know how statistics and math works. And I think also it just goes into denial. But here's my thing. You can't just say, oh, it's only in the blue states, but also say it's not real.
Right.
You can't have both.
It's got to be one or the other.
It's
Also, can I get this last point in? Because you did bring up something interesting, Courtney. So I mentioned the most populous states. So let me go down the list and show you where these states rank as far as population. Louisiana, 25th. Once again, Florida is the third. Mississippi, 35th. Arizona, 14. Alabama, 24. Georgia, 8. South Carolina, 23. Tennessee, 16. Texas, 2. Iowa, 32. That's the top 10 per capita. Ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of those things that, and Courtney kind of hinted at it when talking about just kind of understanding, digging deeper into data, right? There's been a lot of times where I've looked at a tweet from some right-wing pundit, some alt-right loon, or Trump himself, and just when information is presented, they have a lot of trouble going one level deeper, right? When you present information, when you present a theory, when you present stats or data, you can't just look at the top line number, because anytime you do that, you are manipulating data to fit a narrative. You have to dig deeper, because a lot of times just having big number go Burr doesn't tell you the situation at hand, right? So it's like when they cite, you talked about Chicago. It's like when they cite Chicago or black on black crime and black on black violence, and they say, well, 90% of black people are killed by black people. 87% of white people are killed by white people. But we don't talk about that because it's a non-starter, right? I mean, when you talk about violent crime, proximity breeds violent crime, or violent crime, you're usually affected based on proximity. You're not you're not going to walk through Chicago for the most part and just get shot in the face. Like, that's not what happens. You're involved in something, typically because of your circumstance or situation that puts you in that situation that causes violence. So you can't explain that to people who don't want that explained to them. And it's the same thing here. The whole blue state ideology, even math aside, let's take the numbers aside where Ron was talking about per capita, and let's just look at how dumb the statement is. When you say that blue states are the ones that were responsible for the higher number of cases, yes, that's correct. Why? Because one of the first and largest outbreaks of COVID-19 happened in New York City, a densely populated city with a lot of people who are in close contact of each other. So, of course, a virus that spreads very easily when we don't have a lot of science and data about it is going to spread quickly in that kind of location. Same thing with Los Angeles. What's another thing about those two cities? Oh, real quick.
These cities also have major international airports and public transportation. Sorry, I just wanted to add that in because some people, like I said, some people are from areas where they don't have public transportation or a big airport, and they don't think about that.
They don't think about it. So, if you think about, New York is close to Europe. A lot of international flights to Europe happen there. And Los Angeles, San Francisco, they're close to a lot of international travel in Asia. So these are the two things that can create those circumstances in those places. Now, once we learned once we learned that masks could help stop the spread or slow the spread, then those places started putting in the types of restrictions that were necessary. They started putting in the mandates that were necessary to try and slow the spread. So once they began to curve it, guess what? It started spreading to the other states in the union. And they didn't do very much to stop it. Now, I will give Kay Ivey credit where it is due. As weak as the mask mandate is, it's a mask mandate, and it does give basically private entities and private businesses the firepower to say, this is what we're going to do to protect our grounds and slow the spread. It's much better than what Brian Kemp is doing or has done in terms of nothing and actively suing the cities that tried to do these things. So you can't sit up here and say, it's the blue states' fault. It's the blue states' fault when the two hardest hit blue states are the ones that imposed the necessary sanctions once we found out about this virus. And they were the guinea pigs of the virus, right? They were the ones that were hit by it first as everybody was trying to figure out just what the hell was going on. So it's one of those things with the current Republican Party, with the Trump base, with the alt-right, where it's about spitting as much misinformation as possible and not bothering to dive deeper into statistics. They don't know the numbers, or they don't care about the numbers at an intricate level because that's not their goal. So what can you do to fight this? What can you do to kind of fix that issue? Nothing for real, other than spread the correct information to people around you. We are going to be fighting this fight for the rest of the election cycle. We'll be fighting it beyond that. When knock on wood, Joe Biden wins the election and takes over and does the necessary steps to help mitigate the spread, we're already getting the news and the information that we're not getting a vaccine, more than likely a widespread vaccine, until mid next year.
This time next year. That should bother people, right? But what's going to happen when we get Biden in office and a vaccine is out there and is getting spread to the necessary communities first, and they muddy up everything with misinformation? These are the things that we have to be adamant about. We have to ensure that we're putting out there, that we're telling people that, these are lies, right? This is not factually correct. Ron gave you the per capita information. Louisiana has no business being that high on the list.
Iowa
and Mississippi. I have been to Mississippi. Right. There's not a lot of places, a lot of ways to spread it without intentionally getting around other people.
Going to Best Buy in the middle of the pandemic.
Like, I'm with you there. So, and that's what makes it even worse, is when you consider that these sparsely populated states, you can go in places in Mississippi and drive for 30, 45 minutes and not see a soul. I mean, you can't do that in the Atlanta metro area. You can't do that in New York, unless you go upstate. You can't do that in these cities. And that's what they don't understand. And that's what they don't care to understand. That was my rant. So I don't know if y'all want to add anything to that.
And I will add, because I've seen some people, just as someone that I did some volunteer work with the Institutional Review Board at UAB. I'm not obviously not an immunologist, but I have some kind of background with research and science. And if Biden gets elected, they're going to blame it on him. It normally does take that long for a vaccine. And that's what I've been trying to tell people. You do not want a rush vaccine. You don't want a vaccine. If the vaccine takes a short amount of time, you don't want it. No. You want one that takes that long. You want one with standard trials and stuff. And people are falling for a lot of. I need to get this out here, because I've seen people on the left and the right fall for this. Because there was that one study where that one vaccine, they're like, oh, they had to halt this because there were side effects. That's normal. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing they halted it. It happens all the time. Yes. It happens all the time. The problem is that and I've actually been kind of reading into other pandemics that have happened over history. The only thing that really made it slow down, especially before they had things like vaccines, is distancing. is like the virus, and like that point. You have to think about it at this base level. We have to allow the virus to die off, because it can't spread if there's no that infected person, and you can be symptomatic or asymptomatic. If there's no one to spread it to, that's the only way. So we have to try to let this virus die out. And here's another thing that's so dangerous too. Even if you're getting so impatient, if there becomes so many strains, become so mutated, that's so different, we're going to need multiple vaccines. That's the problem. We already have multiple different strains because people keep spreading it and it mutates in a body. That's a whole different thing. And people are equating it to other viruses. And this is not like getting all your kids together so everyone can get the chickenpox, which is stupid anyway, which was the dumbest thing anyway. This is not the same thing at all. And you should all be getting your flu shots, by the way, because you don't want the flu and COVID.
No, and I think you made a point that I want to circle back to, especially talking about vaccine trials and everything of the nature. I think this is the first time for a lot of people that they're able to follow science in action, right? A lot of people who, even people who went to college, who have masters, who have doctorates, they didn't get involved in research in the sense, or weren't aware of what research is, right? Especially clinical research. And so I think you make the major point that when AstraZeneca came out, or was it Moderna? One of the two came out and said, "Yo, we gotta halt this a little bit." That it's normal. And that, if they didn't halt it and they covered it up, and then the vaccine came out, and then there were side effects that, because I think this person, one of the halts that they had, the person had neurological issues, and they were trying to make sure that it was not caused by the vaccine. And so it turned out in that case, in that circumstance, that it wasn't. But what if it was, right? What if it was, and you let that hit market, and then all of a sudden you've got a number of people with brain problems? Those are the things that create distrust in medicine, distrust in science, distrust in vaccines. So yeah, I mean, it'd be fantastic if by the most positive goals they're putting out there, that by April we've got something that we can distribute. But we also need to be ready to still be kind of using these social distancing measures this time next year. And that's just, it is what it is. All of this could have been prevented if we would have taken the proper actions in March to do what needed to be done to slow the spread. The same way Obama did with Ebola and with H1N1, the same way George Bush did with what was it? Was it the bird flu when he was in office, or was it Obama?
It was bird.
So yeah, so as much as I don't care for George W. Bush, he ended up reading a book on pandemics and was like, "Yo, we need to do something about this in case it comes to us." And when it came to us, guess what? We were prepared. Everybody said that we overblew the bird flu and the swine flu, but if Trump had been in office during those times, we're in this situation now.
Right.
Can I add one more thing? And when we're talking about what people can do, I think I need people to understand, it is okay for you not to understand something. It is okay to listen to the experts. You reading a Wikipedia article is not the same as 10 to 12 years of education with 10 to 20 years of experience on top of that. It is totally fine to say, yes, you have more knowledge on this than me. And then maybe if you don't trust that person, look at other researchers in that same field. If they're all singing the same song, it is not a mass conspiracy. Here's the thing I need people to get about the logic. You're insinuating that every single nurse in this country, every single doctor in this country, and multiple people that have had this are all lying. Yeah. Which makes more sense. And this goes for people even that lean the same way that we do. It's okay. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to be able to grasp it by reading up on it as the same way that's an expert. I have some research experience because of my degree in IRB, but there's something I don't know as much as an immunologist. So I'm not going to be like, well, I know more than this immunologist. I need people to understand that. And I think everyone can kind of listen to that a little bit. And for me, it's with scientists that people do this the most.
Well, it's because science is hard to understand, right? Like, science is a very complicated thing. It's something that evolves in real time. It's just one of those things that can be ever changing. And so you have to be okay with the idea of things changing constantly, right? The same people that point and say, well, Fauci in the beginning said that we don't really need masks and that, they won't really do anything to slow the spread. But that was before we knew what we know now, right? And so he's come out and said, yo, I was wrong about that. And people have a hard time with accepting somebody being wrong. They want people to be infallible. And it's one of those things that, again, we have to hammer home the truth, and we must let people know to just kind of to be patient and understand that they may not know everything, right? Like you said, I'm not an immunologist. I understand how research works. You can throw a research paper in front of me. You can throw something in front of me. I can read it, have a better grasp of it, but I don't know enough about it to be able to go to the table and then be able to create policy with it, right? Like, those are the things that people have to be able to understand, that it's okay to rely on other people, on experts, to listen to them. And the experts that you listen to need to be credible. So you need to check their backgrounds. If they have a lot of cases of fraud, like the woman who was interviewed for that Plandemic film, and they were literally arrested for stealing and for not being truthful about their studies, then you should listen to that. Scientific reasoning and scientific communities hold each other to standards for a reason. So I just want people to kind of understand this and go in with that level of understanding and kind of stick to those guns.
Can I say one more thing as an analogy, just to help people understand a little bit better? The same form of science with meteorology, right? They can't see the future. Some people still do this, but they swear to God, they use their knowledge to look at weather patterns to say, this is my prediction, this is what might happen. It's take that same principle and put it towards this. It's the same kind of principle. Remember what happened with Snowmageddon? It was bad because it was a mess prediction. It wasn't that they lied. James Spann didn't lie. It's just that the weather pattern didn't act like they predicted. It was it was hundreds of miles further north than it was supposed to be south. It's the same thing with viruses and pandemics. You can use your knowledge and what you know, especially like there were SARS before, but this one is so new and quite different. There's a lot of unknowns to this. No one has absolute knowledge like that. So think about it in the same way. You wouldn't say, well, this meteorologist James Spann was wrong. So clearly I'm going to read a Wikipedia article on what kinds of clouds there are. And therefore I know more than James Spann.
Which, by the way, before we move on, don't come at James Spann.
Do not.
Some people are like that, but I just use that as a comparison. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't, because you would look like an idiot. It's the same principle with the immunologists and the people at the CDC and scientists and doctors. You wouldn't be respectful of somebody who came to your job and tried to tell you everything about your job and what it entails. So it's you don't know everything, and neither do they, but they know their field. So and that's okay.
It's okay. It's all right. All right. So let's move on. Sorry. No, you're good. Let's move on. I don't necessarily want to get into Bill Barr here. But I mean, we can talk about it real quick. Bill Barr on Wednesday likened the calls for a nationwide lockdown to prevent the spread of the coronavirus to slavery. He basically said it's one of the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in history, other than slavery, right? So bump Jim Crow, bump all the other things that you could point to, bump the Trail of Tears and Indian genocide or Native American genocide. I'm sorry, I apologize. Bump all of those things. Nah. It's mass ordinances that are the great civil atrocity of our country. Look, I'll get my thing out the way real quick, and I'll kind of let y'all tackle this. I do think it's funny how Republicans are adamant about slavery not being that big of a deal. But anytime there's slightly inconvenience, it's immediately likened to slavery. It's a mask. It's a piece of cloth that you put over your nose and your mouth to keep your nasty ass germs from spreading to other people. It's not the same as. Go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead. So slavery was so long ago, but at the same time, any intrusion on your like personal rights, which by the way, wearing a mask isn't an intrusion of your rights. Yep. Apparently slavery is a choice too, just like wearing a mask. But anyway, apparently slavery isn't bad, but it's bad all at the same time. And also like this is our power rankings right here. All right. So number 1, slavery. Number 2, wearing a mask. Number 3. I don't even know what's number 3 after that. But it is ridiculous that you compare this to slavery. How?
Because white people desperately want to be oppressed. Desperately.
And this like stop the oppression Olympics. Like, it is great. It is amazing over there. Stay over there. Like wearing a mask is not the same as
it's like you have so much privilege that to you psychologically an inconvenience is the same thing as oppression.
I too have felt pain.
That cognitive dissonance.
Shout out to the Kari.
Yeah, word to the Kari, not only for tuning in, but for sharing it. So we appreciate that. And along those lines, I do think it's funny that it's so easy. Like, I guess I want to live in a world where my biggest inconvenience is being told to wear a mask, right? Like, I want to be in that world. I want to exist in that space where the worst thing that has ever happened to me is that I have been told that putting a mask on my face will help stop the spread of coronavirus. I don't know what that's like, right? Like I'm trying to keep it in topic and everything like that. Like, first and foremost, Bill Barr is an incredibly evil individual who has corroborated the Justice Department of the United States and turned it into the personal attacking arm of the president, which is not what it's supposed to be. And then on top of that, he has called his own subordinates, or whatever you want to call them, preschoolers. He compared them preschoolers in terms of just the way that he has to kind of allure over his prosecutors because, oh my God, they won't do the president's bidding. It absolutely baffles me. It absolutely, I don't know. I don't have words for it that this is still allowed to happen. I don't. Do we want to move on? Are we done with Barr?
Yeah, let's move on.
I think it speaks for itself.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I thought you were going to go further into that.
No, I'm trying my best not to say things that'll get me in trouble.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to let's talk about Turning Point USA. Let's talk about Charlie Kirk and a lot of these new age, new radical thinkers or wherever they call them.
Can I say something out of color really quick? And it's not going to be like, I'm not going to use like inflammatory language, but there is a certain super church in Alabama, and people couldn't understand why certain people got mad that the pastor of this mega church would invite Charlie Kirk to the church to speak to teens. Now, with that said, Ryan, please roll into your story.
Yeah,
please roll into the next story.
I want to present this in another fashion first, because I want to just talk about how it goes back to what we were saying earlier with just kind of how they don't think past the surface level of an argument or an idea, and how easy it is to dig in and kind of blow up any kind of plan that they have or any kind of let me just get into the story. So Turning Point USA, which is headed by Charlie Kirk, was found to have enlisted teenagers in a troll farm in an attempt to flood social media with attacks about Biden. And the attacks were just so bad. Like they were just kind of light shoves. One of them was mail-in ballots will lead to fraud this election. So these are teenagers, right? You're enlisting 16-year-olds to say these things. They also push the message of nobody knows what to believe and don't trust Dr. Fauci.
Also, let me cut in again. I'm sorry.
I want to talk about Charlie Kirk's own fraud and what's the other idiot-looking fool?
Shapiro.
Not Shapiro. Nobody cares about him. There's another one that's been getting arrested. It might be Charlie.
Jacob Wall.
Jacob Wall. There we go.
But yeah, let me get this in. I promise you, it's gonna take like 30 seconds. But okay. I know the best comparison to make, like people are gonna say, like, well, people like, how is this any different from the TikTokers where they're just posting memes? They're just posting memes. This is spreading misinformation. and they're doing it at the behest of this organization that is closely tied to Republican Party. So yes, that's the difference. Now, I just want to add that. Yeah.
And conservatives are never funny.
No, conservatives are never funny.
This is it to me. Like I was going to bring up TikTok too. It's just so funny to me. It's so funny that it has to be manufactured. It has to be manufactured.
That's my point right there.
It has to be manufactured. And it just, if that is like sums Republicans up, nothing can be organic because they're so robotic. Like Mitch McConnell is a robot turtle. I'm like convinced that like if you open up his skull, it's just a small turtle running things.
I know you make an incredible point that I want to stick with because nothing is organic, right? The only thing that's organic about them is rage, right? That's the only thing they've been able to manifest. And well, that's what I'm talking about, the rage and the racism. That's the thing that they can bounce off of. But when it comes to messaging, right? Like Trump won the White House, they had control of the Senate, control of the House back in 2017. And what do they have to show for it other than tax cuts, right? They ran these campaigns throughout the back end of the Obama administration where basically they were like, well, we're fighting. I use this example all the time. Twinkle Kavanaugh ran for Public Service Commission of Alabama and had an ad in 2010 that said she was going to stand up to Obama. Twinkle Kavanaugh was running for a position that was completely focused within the state of Alabama as public service commissioner that had jack shit to do with Barack Obama. That is the campaign. Those are the campaigns that these fools were running on. So when you've been running for 10 years on just being anti-Obama, anti-black, anti-thing, anti-this, anti-that, and you don't have any kind of, you have no campaign strategy, you have no plans of action. All you did was create tax cuts for the wealthy, and that's the signature part of the Trump administration. Tax cuts for the wealthy, cuts to education. That's it. We don't have anything else for you. Vote for us again so we can keep getting rich. They have to manufacture things in order to stay in power. They have to manufacture lies against people like Dr. Fauci, who's done nothing but serve the country in an actual amicable way because they don't have a platform. I can't drive that home any further. For 8 years, it was, we hate Obama. Now Obama's gone and nothing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Their only identity is anti-Obama. That is their only identity for the longest time. That was their only way of being. And that's the same thing with Trump supporters. Like that's their only way because they were so enraged that black man made it to office. I'm sure they don't even know what the policy is. I was an intern at UAB Hospital, right? Affordable Care Act, not perfect. Could have gotten more, but it saved millions of lives. That's all I can ask for.
I do want to say before you jump into that the first thing on the table that was blown up by people like Lieberman and a few others was a true single payer system. And we don't talk about that, but go ahead.
Please turn that up. Yes.
But there were patients who said they were benefiting from ACA plans, right? And you're like, oh gosh, I hate Obamacare. I hate it. And then just later, how do you like your, the ACA says, oh my gosh, the ACA is amazing. The AC is like, they just like speak glowing. Like if it weren't for that, I would be able to do this. And of course, because of my job, I couldn't do the same thing. But just the association, they built all of this just on hating Obama and wanting to undo everything. It doesn't matter what it was. It doesn't matter if they benefited from it. They want to erase as much of his presidency as possible. And that's the goal. There is no, and that's all because Trump has hated Obama. He started the whole birtherism movement. He's such a racist. He's a raging racist. Hated the fact that Obama was president. In fact, I don't think a lot of people remember that he ran in 2012 and lost hilariously. And he had an anti-Obama platform then too.
Well, the thing with 2012 too, remember, is that he never really put his foot in the water, or he never really jumped in. He put his foot in the water, and everybody's like, okay, get out of here and go promote your book.
Exactly.
And then he turned around, and because there's a whole alternate or branching history path if he does jump into the 2012 primary, because Herman Cain was right there. It was a whole conversation that I don't know we really want to get into, but I think it just goes. it goes back into and like I want to cite Dakari there, because whoever coined it, Obamacare, and going back into the whole Fox News propaganda angle, that it was mitigated and developed there, right? So by doing that, they had people actively fighting against something that was helping them. And that
McConnell and a certain Speaker of the House who stepped down and allowed Paul Ryan to pass the. And by the way, John Boehner, like, we still see you. So anyway.
We still see you.
But yeah, just wanted to toss that in.
And Paul Ryan, we see you too.
I wanted to add one thing. It goes back to the everything being manufactured. It goes back into my whole conspiracy that decades ago, along with the anti-science movement, that they've been intentionally hindering education so people aren't educated and they don't question things. I'm convinced, along with like redlining and districting everything so poorly, I think all this was done at the same time on purpose. And it's working because everything works so simply, like them naming things like the Patriot Act. As long as something has an American name, something they're like, oh, this 400-page thing I'm never going to read. I like the name. So surely it's going to be a good thing. And that's one thing. They can only do it by cheating. They can only do it by misinformation. They can only do it by certain things. That's the only way they can win.
All right, let's jump into our last topic of the day. Let's go over some of these polls. Especially the Quinnipiac poll that just came out this week, which shows some interesting races shaping up. And this is going to tie into to the Bloomberg angle that I wanted to talk about. But some of these polls show some interesting leads. So, for example, Sarah Gideon has a 12-point lead over Susan Collins right now in Maine. Jamie Harrison is currently tied with Lindsey Graham at 48%. Lindsey Graham is underwater favorability-wise by 5 points in the state of South Carolina. And in Kentucky, McConnell is up by about 8 points. So we knew that one was kind of dead in the water. But all of a sudden, South Carolina is on the table. We have talked about all summer long, whatever you want to call it, how Democrats need 4 seats, right? So if Doug Jones loses in Alabama, Democrats need 4 seats in order to at least hit 50, and then with the Biden presidency, have control of the Senate and the House. And right now, it looks like Arizona is going to be one of those seats. It looks like Colorado is going to be one of those seats, and it looks like Maine is going to be one of those seats. But North Carolina has also been on the table. Montana is now on the table. Iowa's on the table. And with South Carolina coming into fruition, we could see a possible outright majority for the Democrats. Why are these polls important? Well, we have also seen that Michael Bloomberg is finally doing what he said he was going to do back in February, which was put $100 million into ads into the Biden campaign for the state of Florida alone. According to polls, Biden is not doing as well with Latin voters as Hillary Clinton did. A lot of that has to do with just kind of the different branching cultures within Latin America, specifically Cuban Americans. But Bloomberg is putting his focus in Florida for the sole reason of allowing Biden and other Democratic organizations to take their money elsewhere. So with these polls coming out, with Bloomberg's contribution, Tom Steyer, I'm looking at you, open a purse up.
I was just about to say, where's Tom Steyer?
Where's Tom Steyer? But with all these things happening and converging together, Courtney, as far as the Senate is concerned, how confident are you that Democrats can take control of the Senate once again?
I'm pretty confident as long as they continue, as long as they play it right. I was going to lead into this point. They got to play the lights and flashing the same game. You can't just go at certain populations with numbers. Sometimes you got to do the cliche ad. Sometimes you got to do it. Sometimes you have to meet at that level. I don't think they're understanding. You're not going to win. You're not going to win doing what you were doing before and being underwhelming. You're just not. You have to kind of see what is working and go that route. You really do. I don't know what to say. Yeah, you kind of have to pour money into advertising because that's what's going to get people. Is if you have an ad that makes someone feel inspired, you know what? That's what it takes. Honestly, I've always said that they, especially with presidential ads, they should base them, a lot of them, on what states they're in, like a lot of the Republicans do. They really
that's something I want to add now. Trump, not only has he withdrawn ads in certain states, but he's not running state-specific ads. His campaign is running a general ad or general ads that he's just putting in certain states. But he's withdrawn from Arizona. He's withdrawn from Michigan. And these are both states that have Biden leads right now. So I kind of want to push along that route a little bit because those very things that Democrats used to do that you were pointing at, he's doing, and it's failing miserably. I don't know.
And they should look at that too and say, well, we now have a clear sign what gets people's attention. But yeah, I'm confident if they play the cards right. It really depends. I think the Republicans are being fucking idiots. I had to cuss there. One of the ways that they could make this so much easier for themselves is just to give another stimulus. A lot of their approval numbers went way up. Way up. I don't know.
Collins, Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, these should be the loudest people about a stimulus.
A stimulus. They should be the loudest in the unemployment. I feel like they would be having it'd be much less scary for them if they would just do that. Honestly, like that's just shocking. I was surprised. I'm like, is your greed so great that you're that stupid? That's for a lot of people, that's all they really need to do.
I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier with them just being out of touch, right? Like, if you were in touch with your voter base, if you were in touch with the people that you represent, you would know so many people are struggling right now and that they needed that money. There were a lot of people that when the HEROES Act was passed in May, they were like, okay, we're going to get something else. Like we're going to get something else. We're going to get help. And they didn't get it. And so now you've left them up the creek without a paddle. So of course they're going to vote your ass out. Like,
and unemployment stopped.
Mm-hmm.
All they had to do, even if you could just let that continue, I'm like, you're fumbling. I'm good with you fumbling, but also this is hurting people. Like, I'm like, this is like strategically one of the worst things you could be doing is just sitting while people are starving and their rent needs to be paid. And even though that there was, forgiveness, people are still going to owe the same amounts.
Ron, go ahead. I know you got something. I know you're itching.
Yeah. So I have quite a few angles to come at this. At first, Susan Collins out of here. Just got to get that out of the way. But I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about two things. One thing that Bernie says still rings true, and we need to really change the structure of how we do things, because Bernie said when you hit, like he was talking about Hillary, he was like, when you hit July, August, whatever, you shouldn't be on the road. You should be reaching the people. You shouldn't be doing fundraisers. Like, you should be reaching the people. So yeah. So just think about it. Like, asking for donations right now, especially while people are struggling. Like, that's a tough ask. So but to much to Biden's credit, what I have seen him doing, in lieu of like running ads, he's been reaching people in different ways. Like, you could call like him hopping in on the Versus What You Want, but that's pretty clever. You could call
reaching people. Yeah.
Right. You can call like what you could call hopping on, Animal Planet with yard signs what you want, but that's still reaching more people. And I think going forward in politics, especially on the national level, you got to find different ways to reach people that'll rely less on the money, because that money is going to come with stipulations. But that's where people like Bloomberg and Steyer should come in. But the second thing I've been thinking about, hypothetically speaking, and this is a question for you both. Yes, I'm asking the question now. Let's say Democrats maintain the House, flip the Senate, Trump wins. What does that look like? What does that Trump administration look like?
It doesn't last.
It doesn't last. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that's one of the most frustrating about Democrats is that they're still doing the we go high thing. My instinct would be like, y'all need to do what McConnell did to Obama and not allow anything and make it look like it's all Trump's fault, but they're not going to, because they need to learn that you can't play the nice game anymore. It's not working. Things are going to continue going like this. They're going to continue spreading.
And I asked that on purpose, because now is the time for the changing tide of this party. And I think no matter what happens, whether Biden is elected or Democrats control Congress, I think there needs to be basically uncompromising and robust legislature, like all levels. So what I do think needs to happen is you have to say, and almost like not like with an iron fist or anything, but you just need to say, if you truly believe that's not us, like that past administration, then show us. Like, if you really believe that's not who we are as a nation, then show us and be uncompromising when you say that. Like Alf, and shout out to Hagen too, one of the Kari's homeboys. He often said, like, me and him getting in a lot of conversations, but he often says, like, sitting in that middle ground allows, the right wing to grow stronger, because the further you try to meet them in the middle, you're just shifting over and over and over more. So if you truly believe that isn't who we are as a nation, then it's time to show us. And no matter what happens in November and going forward, I hope that that's something we carry. We got to say this Trump administration was not us, and we have to make that message like resounding and loud.
Yeah, I want to kind of dive deeper into that, because you put forth a scenario that I don't see happening unless it's a 50-50 split, which then means that they still control the Senate. There's a few things that I want to push here, because you made a good point about you can't stand in the center, right? And I think if anything, this election is going to, here's my personal theory. This election is going to push the country to the left, right? If everything goes well and it needs to be a blowout in Biden's favor, it cannot be close. But if it's a blowout in Biden's favor, I think we see a shift left. Here's the reason why. And I've written about this. Make sure you go to thekidsworkrrounds.com. Go check out my article on this. But the reason why I believe that way is because Trump has polarized so much of the country that there's about 30% of it that is hard to the right? That is not going to move. They're the QAnon supporters. They are the Trump supporters. They are the Tommy Tubervilles. They are all of those people. They are not going away. They're going to stay there. What's going to happen is, if you take power away from them, their voices will get louder. Because their voices will get louder, it's going to force people like Mitt Romney, like John Kasich, some of these soft Republicans, like somebody like a Susan Collins, if she still had power at this point. It would force them to make a decision, because you cannot continue in the face of blatant racism, in the face of conspiracy and anti-science. You cannot continue to go back to those movements. If Biden wins and the Republican Party maintains this QAnon base, Kasich cannot go back. Romney cannot go back. So now what happens? You now start to absorb these former Republicans into a Democratic Party that's starting to have a loud progressive voice. And because of this, you people like Bernie, you people like AOC, the rest of the squad, Ilhan Omar, all of those people begin to continue pushing the party to the left, because they see this invitation of right-wingers and moderates that's going to pull the party back right. So what I think happens is, if we get a Biden blowout, we get a Biden presidency, we get this really aggressive climate bill that he wants to pass, this really, really aggressive climate action with a focus in economics, you're going to naturally convince people to left issues, right? Somebody made the great point. Biden is, as much as Republicans are saying it and it's getting my nerves, Biden is disguising a very progressive agenda wrapped in a conservative viewpoint. Mm-hmm. When you put things like climate action and turn it into a jobs bill, you are talking from a conservative standpoint. When you do things like criminal justice reform and you put it in the guise of public safety, you are talking from a conservative standpoint. And that works. I would have preferred a Warren or a Bernie candidacy, but I now see how important it is that there is a Biden candidacy to push and convince these people who otherwise would not have looked at these ideas into a more left pattern. Courtney, go ahead. I know you got.
I was saying, like, that just kind of made me realize I think he is being really smart, strategic, and he's playing by the Republican playbook on being surface level and disguising things by sweet sounding names. And that's smart. That's what I've been begging. I'm like, honestly, you've got to start playing by the same playbook, honestly. And I think if he does continue that, because you're right, he hasn't, like, he hasn't.
Yeah, shout out to Joe Hendricks.
And like, listen, I don't really kind of push the narrative when Republicans say that he's disguising these leftist agendas in a Trojan horse. They're right. They're correct, because that's what it is. It's a very aggressive, progressive plan. It's something that, when you are talking about ending private prisons, you are talking about ending cash bail. Those are very, I mean, they should be the norm, but they're very what's considered progressive agendas. So it's very important that these things happen, because if you get a Biden presidency and you get a majority in the Senate and these bills pass and these things go into action and Americans then see the benefit of these things, right? They then see how important it is to have climate action, that provides federal jobs with good benefits and great pay. You increase the minimum wage. You do all of these things. That all creates it all pushes things to the left. It's not the total shift that a lot of people want with Bernie, but it's a start. And Biden has said he is a bridge to the younger generation. And those plans do prove that. And if this can come to fruition in terms of winning the White House and winning back the Senate, you are going to see a shift in terms of politics. You're still going to have that loud right, that loud QAnon, but I think their power is going to weaken because there are going to be a lot of Republicans that basically tuck their tails and move and support Biden.
I think one thing too, it's the reason that Republicans can call out a Trojan horse is because they do it all the fucking time. Look at our most recent with the stimulus bill. When people are like, oh yeah, we're getting $1,200, but I feel like the common American doesn't know how much like billionaires and all these large organizations got. They don't know. So like I said, you have to learn to play by the same game.
You have
we
to.
Can change it. We can change it later after we're in, like I agree. Like as much as I want this, I feel like it has to be subtle changes because people have to remember America is so far right compared to the rest of the world. You have to play a different game.
You do. You have to dress it up. Like the car said, you got to dress it up.
And honestly, once you get this power, redraw the district lines. You have to play the same game.
I will say that's what's important about this election, right? The census is this year. So we are redistricting this year. If you want to ensure that Democrats have a better shot of House districts, not only in the U.S. House of Representatives, but their specific states, you need to be getting out there and engaging in the vote. I cannot say it enough. If Trump wins again, he's putting Tom Cotton on the Supreme Court. Go read Tom Cotton's tweets, okay? Mm-hmm. If you are on the fence, he wants to put that man on the Supreme Court. So I need people who are just kind of, and again, I get it, man. Like, I get it. If you're somebody who identifies more with socialism, if you're somebody who identifies more with Bernie Sanders, that you may look at Joe Biden and look at his history and go, I can't support that dude. But you need to look at the platform and you need to look at what we're up against. If we don't get a Joe Biden presidency, we need to be planning for climate refugees. We need to be planning about California and places like that being uninhabitable.
Roe versus Wade overturned. And here's the thing too. Multiple Supreme Court seats. We have the Senate redistricting. So much is laying on this. It's long-term, lifelong. If you think we see fascism now, and here's the thing, you have to vote local too, because we can't let what happened with Obama again and let it be all Republicans. You have to stay consistent with it. It sucks. And I do get it. But here's the thing, you can't just think about yourself. You're like, how is this going to affect millions of people?
All right.
Like, yes, your moral convictions are there, but just think about the consequences.
Perfection should not be the enemy of progress. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'll leave it. What I will say before we get out of here, since Courtney talked about voting local, tomorrow, make sure you tune in at 12:30. I will have the opportunity to interview State Representative Sam Park. He is Georgia's representative for District 101. He is the first ever Asian American elected to the Georgia General Assembly and the first ever openly gay man elected to the Georgia General Assembly. He was featured at the Democratic National Convention in the keynote speech this last month. So please make sure you tune in tomorrow. If you have representatives that you would like for us to speak to, let us know. We have reached out to several different people. We are hoping that we can make a big announcement for next week. We're still waiting to hear back from some people. But
you're watching this, you know who you are.
You know who you are.
So hit him with the Dougie is all I'll say. But
hey, man.
If you wouldn't have reacted, it'd have been fine. But anyway, please just make sure y'all continue to tune in, support local candidates. reach out. I'm gonna say this all the time from now until November, and I'll say it afterward. Reach out to your local representatives. Okay. I emailed these people and they contacted me and said, yeah, I'd love to do an interview, or I'd love to chat. They want to talk to you. Okay. These are the people that directly represent you in your state. Contact your state senators, all of those things. Okay. It's much easier for me to reach somebody like Jen Jordan as opposed to Kelly Loeffler, right? Like I can reach, I can call, or I can find out and find out what she's doing. So do those things, contact your representatives and talk to them because they want to hear from you.
I think that's a great note to end it on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. KidsWearCrowns.com, at the KWC blog. Courtney on Twitter at CourtLizCamp. I'm on Twitter at EagleEyes1906 _ follow us on Facebook, all of that fun stuff. The podcast will be up tomorrow. My interview with Sam Park will be live tomorrow, and then the podcast will be up tomorrow evening. So thank y'all so much, and we will talk to y'all soon.
Bye.
Shout out to Kari. We appreciate you, man. We really do.